before we begin, can I ask for a show of hands of who in this room understands the meaning of the term churning in the airline booking sense? Okay, about a third of the people here. Okay, I'm just going to read you out a little definition before I introduce the panel. That is, this is taken from the Carlson-Wagonly website. Travel arranger must not repeatedly book and cancel the same itinerary or similar itineraries due to indecision, to circumvent or to extend ticketing time limits, or when awaiting account approval. An example of churning is, Paul held a flight on Monday in his company's online booking tool, but he didn't ticket by the deadline on Tuesday, so it was automatically cancelled by the airline. He then rebooks the same flights on Wednesday, but was still not 100% sure that the meeting was taking place. So he didn't ticket by the deadline on Thursday again, and once again, the flight was cancelled by the airline. On Friday, he again booked the flights and proceeded to have them ticketed. If this round-trip itinerary contained a connection each way, the cost of this churning debit memo, that would be an agency debit memo, could be as high as $230. And in some cases, the fees associated with these practices, with these violations, are more expensive than the airline tickets themselves. So churning is obviously a very big concern. I'm going to introduce you to the panel and ask people with more expertise than I have to actually talk about the meaning of what this practice does in the travel circle. So I'm just going to introduce you to the people here first and then put my first question. At the far end, we have Emmanuel Banza, who's the acting GM of Amadeus South Africa. We have Wendy Clausen of Comair. Am I right, Wendy? Comair. They, obviously, it's the BA Comair franchise, and Kalula, everything falls into Comair. We have Richard Addy, who is the general manager of Sabre in South Africa. We have Marco Cicchetti, who is the MD, owner of Sandown Travel, very, very well-known travel brand in South Africa. And then we have the lovely Mohsin Jassad here, who is obviously from Travelport, but has very deep airline experience before he came to Travelport. So the first question really is around the implications of this practice of churning. What it really means for, let's talk about, what does it mean for the airlines first of all? What are the biggest implications for an airline when an agent engages in this churning behavior? Wendy, you could answer that, I'm sure.
Okay, the biggest impact is we can't resell the seats that are being continuously booked and rebooked on the same flight. We could be selling it to someone else instead of keep rebooking the same seat. It costs us an awful lot of money because we're paying every single time that seat is held for a certain amount of time. We start getting charged by the GDSs. That's probably the biggest impact. And yeah, I mean, sometimes we've seen the churning 10, 15 times. That same seat is being rebooked by certain people.
Okay, so it's a cost implication, plus the inventory is being occupied by bookings which are never going to eventuate. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Okay. Usually when there's a cost implication, it's not going to be borne by anyone excepting for the consumer in the end. In this case, the consumer is the corporate consumer, so corporates should be worried about this practice. Often the reason that it happens is because the TMC has a certain uncertainty, and that uncertainty comes from the corporate client. Obviously, there are many occasions in business when one cannot be certain, sort of on an hourly basis, the date or time of a meeting can change. But I think that if corporate travel buyers and people who determine corporate travel policy could be clearer about the damages caused by this practice, I think that we could possibly get less churning in the industry. Marco, you being a TMC, or heading up a TMC, I'd like to ask you, just go through the methodology of churning once again for the people in the room so that they can clearly understand, because I know you understand it better than I, what actually is happening when something is being, the true churning. Just tell us what it is.
Okay, first of all, I think what is important to understand is that it is a huge cost. Firstly, to the airlines, as Wendy has explained, it is a huge cost to the TMC because it's an HR cost. Every time the consultant has to rebook and rebook and rebook, it's a huge cost. Okay. You mentioned a cost to the corporate. At this stage, I don't believe it is a cost. It's actually a free service that is being given to the corporate, because the costs that you read out at the moment are not really being charged out. Okay. The GDS obviously has got their costs. The GDS is a critical part of this whole thing. We spoke about data earlier on, and that's where we get all our data from to supply the corporates. But the churning is something that basically the corporate requires. They require time sometimes in order to get, they need to get a quote. They need to get that quote approved. It sometimes takes, once they got that quote, they get it approved. They got to set meetings. They see if that meeting sometimes cannot get approved, so therefore they need time. So it is a requirement for the corporate in many cases that they need time. So unfortunately, that is something that possibly would need to be paid for. You need that flexibility. You must pay for that flexibility. At the moment, there is no mechanism that allows us to charge for that. Okay, so what I see. I mean, everything is being unpacked at the moment. It might not be churning, but I'll bring an example of let's say seating. Airlines are charging for seating, and people and out there we're saying that why are the airlines charging for seating when I bought my air ticket? And now I'm saying it's actually a good thing, because for the corporate it's a good thing. Leisure travelers book a year ahead, and they can book their seat, an aisle seat or a window seat that they want. Corporates cannot book a year ahead, and then they'll end up sitting in a middle seat because the flight is not available. So rather charge for that seat so that you've got a choice of seat. The leisure traveler will sit in a middle seat because he's happy not to pay for that seat. Same thing over here. You require the flexibility. Well, unfortunately, you'll have to pay, because I've read that there is still a cost to distribute for the airline on an online, okay, which is similar to a one-time booking without rebooking it again on the GDS. So if you want the facility of extending that booking, you need to pay for it.
Yes, that sounds like quite a coherent argument. And airlines can change things. Things can change. So let me ask any one of the GDS representatives here if they'd like to talk about is there anything that could change on GDSs that would be GDS initiated and not necessarily airline initiated, that could change the situation and somehow resolve this problem, which is such a huge cost to airlines?
Okay.
Manuel.
I think as GDS is our contribution to making that particular issue less of a problem is in the technology that we provide. Because at the moment we do now have the technology that travel management companies can get, which allows them to actually count the transactions, the number of times a booking is altered, the number of times a traveler requests services on a PNR, which on its own can be a deterrent in terms of allowing the travel management company to then charge fees based on those transactions, which to the corporate may actually raise an alarm bell to say, well, if we're paying so much based on the number of times we're making changes, shouldn't we actually change our own practices? Okay. The other one also is the requirement where corporates ask for 3 quotations. Now, that also leads to a lot of unnecessary bookings. But the issue there is GDSs, we've now got tools that actually allow travel management companies to provide quotations without making a booking, which also saves on that wastage. on the travel management company side as well, that issue of counting the number of times a consultant cancels and rebooks can also be calculated by the travel management company to establish what is the cost of this consultant to the company and how many times do they spend on a booking and the value of that travel consultant and the fee that they're getting, do the two match? If they're changing a booking 55 times and each particular time that they change it, there's a fee attached to that or a cost, and you add it to the final fee that is being paid by the corporate, is that corporate actually meeting that particular cost? So those transaction counters and the tools that we provide allow travel management companies to have the intelligence to be able to put in place deterrents that then make that less of a problem.
Okay, so you can actually create a deterrent in the technology.
Yes.
Can you do the same for an online booking tool where passengers are booking themselves? And also, maybe we can just go into the online booking tool. Can passengers churn for themselves on the online booking tools generally? Does anybody want to answer that? Anybody technological? Richard?
I just wanted to come back to the previous question a bit. And first, good morning, everyone. Of course, churning is, I think everyone would agree that churning would not be a nice activity to do. Obviously, if we book a restaurant, or if I had to book at the GBTA workshop 30 seats and I just show up at 2, I'm sure Sharon would be quite annoyed with me. So it's pretty much the same. And also as customers, we don't want to have a full plane completely booked where actually 2 days after there are still available seats. So no one really wants to do churning, but I would really agree with what Marco said on the fact that it's a service. It's a service that the TMC is providing and will continue to provide to the corporate, because today this is what the travel buyers are looking for, is to have that flexibility. And we all know that uncertainty will continue in the corporate world, and that no one will be able to book straight away or say, yeah, I could book a $2,000 ticket to London like that. So it's a service. So we have two ways of managing that service that we all, whether it's the airline, the TMC, or us, the technology companies, we all want to provide to the TMC, to the travel, to the corporates. The first way is obviously to charge, and I think that's obviously a very logical and coherent way, as you said. Branded fares could be an idea, or charge for an aisle seat or corridor seat will be a good idea, and I think that's a very interesting way. The second way, obviously, it will be a very logical way if everyone actually does it, because by the moment another travel agent doesn't charge, then all the corporates will go to that travel agent that doesn't charge. So if everyone's playing the game, why not? It could be a good idea, but then the cost will be accrued to the corporates, which actually, do we really want that? I'm not sure. The second solution would be to leverage technology. I mean, we've been talking about data for the past hour, and it was actually very interesting on what was said in regards to that data and that availability of data and that sharing of data. With that sharing of data, we as technology companies and also as players in the travel industry, we have the ability to be a bit more proactive and to provide the right solution at the right time to the corporates. And I think that truly leveraging technology and online booking tool, as you said, would be probably the first step, but behavior will be the second step. Policy understanding will be the third step. What is your decision process? Can actually your manager approve online using his mobile phone just straight away so that you don't have to wait for that ticket to cancel? So all those behaviors, tools, technologies need to be implemented, and it is clearly through technology that we will be able to optimize churning. Are we there today? Probably not. Are we going there tomorrow? Certainly. Using technology, using data, using instant access, we're going into providing more services to the corporates and making sure that we are providing that service that will enable easier decision and processes.
Thank you, Richard. Can I just ask Mohsin, you are with Travelport, okay. It always seems to me like there's something terribly old-fashioned, without standing on anybody's toes, old-fashioned about airline technology. It seems to me that often we have airline technology and revenue management, and there's all sorts of new technologies happening around them, but those technologies don't seem to be able to make much impact on the user-friendliness of the actual airline systems. And I'm thinking that this could be one of those cases also. I know in the past there's been talks about airlines just rationalizing their booking systems, rationalizing their revenue management, rationalizing all the different classes and things that have been so carefully constructed over the last years. But wouldn't that go a long way towards creating an easier and perhaps more sensible airline booking system inside the GDSs, Mohsin?
Okay, so I think from an airline revenue management type system, they've certainly evolved. A lot of what is spent today by airlines is on how do they effectively manage their inventory. So inventory is something which, if available today and sold today, comes at a profit or a benefit to the airline. If not available today or sold today at a certain time, comes a loss to the airline, and it's a lost opportunity. But I think, if I can, just going back to your question earlier about how do you manage churning, how does airlines manage churning on their own platforms? It's simple. They request a form of payment. And so if payment is guaranteed at the time of booking, the seat is reserved. If not, it's not reserved. So an airline has a mechanism to manage its inventory better.
Can I ask you something about that, though? It's not managing its inventory better because the agent can then go in and book it again and occupy that seat for sort of as many times as they want to. Am I right?
That's for their own quality platforms, so their own online booking tools. In the case of a GDS, absolutely correct. So the churning does happen, and the prominent concern is within the GDS space. And I think just on that light as well, I mean, we've got Bulelwa, my airline colleague and comrade, and we've got Brian in the room as well. And I think if we really consider the relationship that airlines have within the trade, is that they are seen to be an authority, and maybe a higher authority. So maybe their message to us today is that thou shalt not churn. and whilst that may be a joke, the intent is if one looks at the impact to an airline. So I just mentioned that revenue management systems are quite complex today, and it matches available inventory to a market demand. What that means is that if a market today is able to pay a certain average fare, and that average fare is then factored into the automated revenue management tools that we all know of today. So there's a point of sale revenue management tool that's taken the market by storm, and there are those that have enhancements to it and those that have been tapered and so forth. But what that says is that it measures inventory, or it matches inventory with the market demand. So if you take churning, for example, and if you look at the booking curve of an airline, so an airline may have 26 classes of booking today, and those are divided into fare families, for example. And as inventory gets booked, fare families close off, buckets close off. They call them buckets from airline talk, so I'm educating you as well. And the buckets close off, and as they close off, the next buckets become available, and those become more expensive. So technically, by churning, you're holding onto a seat which could have been sold earlier to a confirmed purchaser who would probably pay 25 or 30% less for the same seat, to a later sale for the exact same seat, you're now paying 30% more. An airline cannot open a bucket once it's closed because that's not progressive revenue management, right? That's regressive revenue management. So the intent for airlines is to ensure that the right inventory is placed in the right market at the right times. Now, how does this impact all of you as intermediaries? And to me, the relationship that we hold as a GDS is that we're a responsible stakeholder. And in that stakeholder includes TMCs, whom I call intermediaries. It includes the airlines. There are vendors and other service providers that host their inventory on GDSs and provide those to you. The intent is that if that inventory is not available at the right time in the right market, the price goes up. What that means is you as a consumer are paying 30% more for the same inventory that you could have booked earlier. The impact to us as a GDS is that you may, as a TMC, not book that inventory again on the GDS. And that could then go directly to an alternative model, direct sale model. We lose out on the availability or the opportunity to make a sale. And for an airline, they lose out on actually planning the inventory better. So imagine that if they had to plan inventory for the South African market, which we all know is highly commoditized today, especially your domestic travel, if they were giving us a median average fare, and our market doesn't accept the median average fare, that means we're all going to pay more for air travel tomorrow. To what benefit? So the idea, and coming back to the question, Kate, the roundabout answer is, the revenue management systems are well advanced. They're highly automated today. Yes, they do speak to the GDSs, and they speak through the various media like ATPCO and so forth, on whom they rely to publish their fares. And based on however the demand cycle and curve and however advanced an airline is, it still doesn't overcome some of the issues that are inherent to the industry. So we as GDSs can provide tools to TMCs, and for them to be able to manage their queues better, to manage their travel profiles better, the traveler expectations better, but it eventually relies on us being able to understand the entire impact to all stakeholders in the market.
Thank you, Mohsin. Marco, I want to then ask you, is it possible to run a travel management company efficiently in which the agents do not churn at all? Is it possible?
I would say it's almost impossible. It's impossible because if one travel management company decides that they will not churn, there's a good chance that you will lose the customer because the next travel management company will do so. So the solution would be to, one would have to find a solution to it. There is no question that there is a need for more time to issue those tickets, but that is a cost to somebody. It's a cost to the airline, okay? So somebody needs to pay for that, okay? So if there's that need, you need to pay for that need. So, or else, as there was the example earlier on about the, the fact that for car hire, 120 Ks going down to 90 Ks. Well, I require 5 days in order to get, for me to issue my ticket. You go to an airline, you negotiate with them. I will agree to do all my business to put all my business through you, but I need 5 days to issue my ticket. The chances are that they will agree to that, and then they will, through the GDS, allow you 5 days to issue their ticket. So that is one way of doing that. But any other way, it will not work. Churning will continue forever. Okay. The other way, possibly, of stopping it is if you cannot end the booking, okay, without putting something. Now, if you need 5 days, maybe an airline document that costs 100 Rand to keep that booking alive for a further 5 days. That could be another method. Mm-hmm. The fact that there is technology available that can tell you how many times you churn the booking, etc., unfortunately will not solve the problem. Because of the fact of what I've just explained. If I start charging my customer, the next agent will not.
Okay, that's quite clear. Thank you very much, Marco. I just want to ask another question. In the example that I read out from the Carlson Wagonly website, they talked about ADMs. Is it common practice for airlines in the South African market to recoup their GDS costs caused by churning via agency debit memos? Marco, again, you might be the person to answer that. I don't know.
I don't think that's possible because you have no idea whether you'll get that ADM, whether you will not get that ADM. It's not a set. Rather, don't end that. You cannot end that booking without a charge. Okay, if you want to, if you know that there's going to be a charge, rather pay it up front. So I'd rather have that cost up front, not that I'm not sure whether I'm going to get that cost. So I don't think an ADM will work.
Okay, Wendy, would you like to comment on that? Does your airline issue ADMs to cover the cost of churning on the GDS?
Sounds like a great idea, but no, not really. Everybody will be up in arms, and we'll be hung, drawn, and quartered in about 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. We literally cannot recoup those costs. The only thing we do have on the Kulula side, which works quite well, is our revenue integrity, which will cancel a booking that is duplicated. So if a person's asking for a quote, they get their 3 quotes on whichever airline it is, and the routing is the same, the times are about the same, days obviously the same. The Kulula flight will cancel within a certain time. It'll warn the agent, TMC, duplicate booking, please cancel or confirm. So they are given a bit of a warning. But we're still bearing the cost of that seat if they don't take it, well, depending on which GDS they're on.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the ADM definitely sounds lovely, but no, never going to work. I don't know how else we would really deal with the churning. Just, yeah, not ending the booking or ending the booking with a charge sounds like a really good option.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think we're going to end it there unless anybody here has any more insights they'd like to give into this phenomenon. And I hope that it's made the problem clearer for travel buyers as to why it is problematic for TMCs and airlines when there is a lot of churning. Does anybody else? Yes.
If I can just say something. The last question on the previous session was regarding whether TMCs are still, required or needed. Now, there are some airlines, in the room here, and I don't know. It appears there seems to be a messages that go out there that almost appears as if the airlines are wanting to attract business directly through the online booking tools, etc., etc. But I don't believe that is what they are trying to do. I cannot think of any single corporate that is not going through a TMC. Okay, the airlines are obviously looking for ways of reducing their distribution costs. I don't see churning is a distribution. It's an extra distribution cost that they have, which I agree that they need to try and reduce that cost. Okay, we need to find a way of charging it out. Who is benefiting from it at the moment, unfortunately, is the customer, who is not, and that's the reality.
Mm. But I'm just trying, also just further to what you say, I'm just looking, we can deal with it in terms of allocating the cost all over the place, but actually the cost is to the airline, ultimately. The airline doesn't want to issue ADMs in this market, or most airlines don't seem to want to issue those ADMs in South African market. So I can't really see that we're sort of pushing towards a solution. But anyway, as I said, let's just leave it there unless you want to talk more about that, Marco? About actually finding a solution where the cost goes away rather than just allocating the cost to one party or another.
Well, I don't think that I'm sure that, the GDSs, they know their cost structures. I mean, unless the GDSs were to say, we'll allow you to book and rebook without charging you, but I doubt it whether they can do that.
Well, let's ask them. Are you guys planning to do that at all, do you know? I don't think so. Anyway, thank you very much, and thank you to our
just
lovely panelists.
to your question, it's always an interesting question. If we all provide a service, I mean, whether it's the TMC and I would agree with you, Marco, again, this service will always be needed to corporates. Whether it's us as GDS or technology companies, our service is to provide technology and adapted technology to the current market, and the airlines, their service is obviously to transport us. There's a cost allocated to each of those services, and there will always be costs allocated to each of the services. Everyone understands that, and I truly believe that the corporates and the customers will understand that for every service that they have to do, they'll have to pay for that. The question is how to adapt that service, so us, the traveling industries, so the TMCs with their service, us with the technology companies and their airlines, how to adapt that service to benefit the needs of the corporates. And this is where I think, and clearly I do believe that the industry is moving in that right direction, where today obviously we have churning, but it's not only a cost problem, it's also an inventory problem, and you did mention it, where the inventory gets completely unreal because of that practice as well. So it creates a lot of different misunderstanding, where us, as with our different services, need to provide a more proactive solution again to the corporates, again, to fit their needs. And this is clearly where it's going as well.
Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you, Emmanuel, Wendy, Richard, Marco, and Mohsin. Thank you.